Oh, hey YouTube. Didn't see you there. So I want to start out by saying I'm a huge political junkie. I love politics. I love campaign strategy. I love theory crafting around all of it. I want to give my takes here on the 2024 primary from that view of a political junkie that isn't really part of the GOP despite voting for them in the last couple of elections. I was a registered Democrat for years, and I want to make my values up front so that you know I'm like a 90s Bill Clinton Democrat, not meaning I side with everything Bill Clinton says or did in his life, just I kind of follow the policies that the party was about at that time. I usually side with the people over the government generally, but I do think there needs to be a proper way for government to act, and if they adhere to that, they do need to be given the thumbs up every now and then as well. So, not always going to side with the people. Yeah, again, I just want to be transparent and try as hard as I can to shed my bias here, even though I know there's no way to seriously separate yourself from your political views. So getting into this series, I kind of want you to forget everything you feel towards Trump. If you like him or if you hate him, just put that aside. We're going to more talk about GOP political strategy here. If you give a version of the "it's his turn" argument, or if you think he's a fascist, then I can't really do much for you here. I'm more talking to people that are willing to think of this from the perspective of somebody that's designing campaigns, trying to figure out the best person to win the 2024 election. The "it's his turn" argument, I don't mean that in a derogatory sort of way either. I'm more talking about people that either say Trump or loyalists to Trump in that they think since 2020 didn't go the way that they anticipated, or they think it was stolen, that they think Trump deserves another shot, or they think that Trump lost legitimately, but since Biden's administration is seemingly doing so bad, that he should be the contender. He was the last representative elected by the party to represent the party as the presidential contender, so people think rightfully that should still be his. It's a solid argument. I don't agree with it, but I definitely see where they're coming from. So if you have any counter arguments, feel free to throw them in the comments, but I'm going to get to a lot of things here. So I will say don't press that send button because I might already address your point in my 8 pages of notes below. So stand back, stand by. We're diving in. So here I want to get into 3 arguments to kind of break this down. I think they do have some crossover. Some points that are better in one also do fit as another point in others. But my 3 arguments are going to be separated into: is Trump a good figure versus the rest of the GOP primary contenders? Is Trump good versus Biden? And is Trump good just generally and for America as who he is? And I'm not going to get to all 3 of these. We're going to focus on the first one, the primary, just because where we are in the timeline right now in terms of the elections coming up and everything. So I can already hear a lot of you out there saying, Tyler, you extremely intelligent, masculine, insightful hunk of a man, why would you do any of this? And really, I just really enjoy it. Well, this is the election, and we are kind of comparing it to potential other elections, so I think it's only fair to compare people to who they're running against in some instance. In the primary, you're not just looking at Trump, you're looking at Trump versus who he's lined up against, because you have to pick one of them at the end of the day. So your expectations have to be within this window of choices you're given. So I think it's good to break these down. And if DeSantis doesn't get into the election, about 25 to 50% of this video may be inert. I'm really expecting the Ron versus Don showdown, and I would love to see it. The main focus of this video is going to be Trump. So in a lot of my arguments where I use DeSantis, you could plug somebody else in like Brian Kemp or Nikki Haley, and they would fit that role just as well as Ron DeSantis. Looking at the polls right now, Ron DeSantis is obviously the next biggest contender, so I just used him. So we're going to talk about the primary right now, and I'm going to focus on the early numbers for the primary. Anyone old enough to see a presidential cycle knows that early polls tell us not a lot and can't be taken as fact. If you remember in 2016, it showed Jeb would be leading the party against Hillary Clinton, and Hillary would have been the candidate in 2008. If we followed the same polls and ignored others in February 2022, Bernie was going to win the Democratic primary despite Biden pulling ahead in later months. So you can cherry pick polls and whatnot, but I'm looking at overall trends, trying to look at aggregate. If I don't do that and you can provide me some context, I would love to hear it in the comments. I'll re-record the entire video just to change my script for you. So you can change my mind. Feel free, just bring your facts. So again, don't take these polls as proof of reality yet. A lot could happen. DeSantis could run into a burning building and save 13 special needs kids, all caring for special needs puppies, run out with all 26 bodies in his arms, and then Trump could come out in favor of communism in the same day, and it would completely reverse what happens in the polls. So these are wild examples, but I'm just saying tomorrow, just these two events could completely switch what's going on in polling. So just again, take it all as we're just trying to quickly peer into the window, but we don't know how they're living. So today, we're going to ask if Trump is good versus other GOP contenders. You'll see a couple of these arguments again when I get into my second question, because some of them are good to ask now and even more important to ask later. So, like or hate Trump, Trump's got some baggage. That's going to be our first jump to citation here. Trump was a little bit of an a-hole. Trump said some things that set people off. He was divisive. People liked that about him. I get it. But a lot more people didn't. They say that Trump derangement syndrome is kind of what won the election, because if you just had to go Biden versus Trump, who's going out to vote for Joe Biden? But they went out to vote against Trump. Those that believe the election was legitimate. I'm not going to get into that here. Please don't. I don't care right now. Maybe I'll do something about it another day. But 47% of GOP conservatives, and I've seen this number vary to up to 55, say they just wish Trump would stop being the way he is on Twitter. And the way he is was a bit toxic. We go to this second citation here with Pew Research. I just want to back these up because there are a lot of people that really like Trump, and they might even like these things about him, and they personally are happy with them. But I'm just showing you, this is kind of what the majority of people think. They don't view him as trustworthy. They don't think he cares about people like them. They don't think he's that well informed. But they do think he keeps his promises and he gets things done, and he really stands up for what he believes in, which are things people do like. I totally understand them. You can't look at some of this research and say that a lot of America has some problems with him, and his biggest fan base is definitely his primary voters. So, we can look at his comments about injecting sunlight into people. That one was controversial at the time, so I looked for his defender's best argument, and what I could find was he was just joking. So we're going to go with that. I want your best argument. If there's a better one, present it in the comments, and again, I will address it. But this is the best I could find. When he was saying injecting bleach into you, it would cure COVID, and smiled at the camera, he was just making a joke, which, okay, but in the middle of a COVID press conference, in the middle of COVID, when like 200,000 people had died at that point from COVID, even if you dispute those numbers, I'm just talking from a perspective of the average U.S. voter. They didn't dispute the numbers. Most people believe those numbers, at least at that time. And when they hear something like that from Trump, a joke, when maybe their grandparent had just died of COVID, it turns people off that would have otherwise potentially voted for him. It wasn't good. Even the defenses of it weren't good. Then again, I do understand that there's people out there that do attack Trump unfairly, take some things he says out of context, assume his intent, ignore the rest of the context, like many people on both sides. That's going to be my next one. So if you read the transcript of him addressing that, and this is him talking about him addressing it, he does say that there are bad people on the side that wants to keep the statues, and he addressed neo-Nazis and white supremacists specifically. Those first claims came as a smear. It was an attempted smear. And so I do see these things. I do get it. But that doesn't mean every bad thing about Trump's, what he says, was inaccurate. There are some things that he said that the public did not like. So you have to recognize that these things I'm pointing out here, mostly with Trump the person, people don't like him as a person. They think he's a pretty effective leader. But if they think someone else could be equally as effective without the character flaws, I do feel like primary voters are smart enough to say maybe we should go a different direction. So what makes a good primary candidate? Right now, you see a ton of arguments put forth. A lot of them have merit behind them, but a lot of them you could also take the same amount of data and debunk them with. I've seen enthusiasm, talk of enthusiasm gaps and such, and then I've seen elections where just the enthusiasm gap didn't tell you anything because, again, they hated the other person more than they were enthused about their own candidate. There's a lot of indicators, but nothing I have seen really tells you what's going to happen until the votes start coming in. So it's almost like being a weatherman or trying to predict the future. Again, I don't want to debate any of the it's his turn arguments, but I get him. I totally understand where you're coming from. I think that Trump talking about 2020, and he even said this in his town hall on CNN, that he was going to drop that issue once the actual campaigns really kicked off because it was divisive and it wasn't popular. And I think that's a weak point for him. But I don't think it's more in the general. I don't think the primary voters care so much about it. So I kind of left it out of here. Again, that one's going to hurt him in the general if he makes it there. But so what makes a good primary candidate, again, is cross appeal to groups under the giant banners that are the left and right wing movements in this country. So people complain about the two-party system, and I really hate that argument. I think they're extremely more complicated than that, and people don't want to admit it or don't want to look into it. So this dude, Matt Continetti, has a book called The 100-Year War for America, where he talks about the 9 factions inside the GOP that have been kind of fighting for power and teaming up with each other against each other for the last century. And if you really want to know more, it's super interesting. You can dive into his book or listen to him at the Commentary Magazine podcast. I'm a huge fan. You'll hear me talk about it a bit. I don't side with him that much on politics, being kind of a Bill Clinton liberal, but I think they're decent human beings, and they're usually intellectually honest, unless they don't really like Trump, so sometimes they make some bad arguments when it comes to him, but otherwise, they're pretty good. I really recommend it if you've never tried them out and you want a good neocon source to balance out a well-balanced media diet. So yeah, all we need to know is that these factions exist, and what makes a good candidate is somebody that can pool together several of these internal groups. I feel like Ron DeSantis has the advantage there a bit. Trump is the master of the NatCons, but I feel like DeSantis started his governorship as a NatCon. He campaigned as one, and he also has taken some stances against Disney and against woke DAs, firing that DA that, and several things that actually appeal to the NatCons. And really, I think the NatCons and neocons are really similar on a policy level. I think their biggest disagreements are on the culture war. So all DeSantis has to do is nod to their side every now and then, and he can at least win enough over to win the primary, I feel like. And that's going to be dependent on some other things I'm going to get to. All we need to know is these factions exist, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, what really matters at the end of the day is if you get the votes. That's what essentially makes the best primary candidate, is if you get the votes. So the second or another factor is going to be the appeal for, going into the general. It's not as big in the primary as it should be, but it is brought up. The fact that DeSantis had some polling numbers out of Pennsylvania and Arizona, 2 states that Trump lost, that show that he was actually outperforming Trump against Biden in those 2 states, is kind of a big deal, but it really matters more in the general. It's just a talking point in the primary. DeSantis is more appealable in 2 swing states that Trump lost. than Trump is. And really, like, again, it's about who gets the vote. So, okay, actually, there's an exception to that I want to bring up. So there is one exception to the rule, and right now he's in the news. So George Santos is kind of an example of that exception to the rule. If you did something unforgivable to get the votes, or while you were in office, like if you participated in sex trafficking or something like that, then it doesn't matter if you have the votes. If you do something despicable, you should kind of be expelled. If you break the law, you should be arrested and removed from office, things like that. So there is that example. I'm just trying to get ahead of that counter argument for some guy with a fedora that sees this and says, well, actually, because there are exceptions to that rule, but generally, if you get the votes, that is what really matters in the primary. There are, like, political polarity is a big divisiveness is a big factor, but I don't think it matters so much in the primary. Trump gets an F on that, and I think he's still the best person to get in as the GOP nominee in the primary. He hits key issues for Republican voters very well, all but one, and I'm going to get into those in a little bit here. I'm going to go through all the key issues and where I think Trump has strengths and weaknesses as well. So I think he has the potential to win on like 4 of those 6 top key issues. And you know who else thinks that is our third citation here, Real Clear Politics. You take a look through here, and most of these, Trump just crushes it. Actually, all of them, Trump wins, but most of them he crushes it. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. I'm going to get into split field theory in a second, but we can get to the swing state thing again in a second here, but there's not many, a lot of these aren't swing states that you're going to see on here. Trump obviously is the best candidate in the primary if you just separate this polling information here and nothing else. It shows he's going to win every state and crush it in several others. But to get into split field theory is that you saw this in 2020 with Biden, but you saw it fail in 2016 against Trump. I think it's fair to assume when some of these less popular candidates like Haley and Ramaswamy and Christie and Noam drop out, that any base that they have, any votes that they have, are going to go to the candidate that is most similar to them politically or the person that they endorse. I could see all but Ramaswamy endorsing DeSantis if it really comes down to a battle between those two. And if split field theory shines true, which it did in Biden's case in 2020, those votes are all going to accumulate and be the majority over Trump's minority. And in several states, if that's the case, Ron DeSantis is within striking distance. In Georgia, he actually is winning, and in Florida and New Hampshire, he would be within just a couple of points if the split field theory that I'm putting forth has any merit to it. And again, it worked for Biden. That was a big complaint, that there was coordination in the split field theory in the 2020 primary. All these people dropped out right before Super Tuesday, and it gave Biden all these additional voters that would have been split up otherwise. It did end up working out for him. He ended up winning Super Tuesday, and that was when he actually took the lead away from Bernie. And I think Pete Buttigieg won Iowa in the end of it. It was such a huge debacle. I don't remember how it played out. I think it was Pete Buttigieg. So, looking into these very early numbers, it's a bit general, but this is the DeSantis and the swing states thing. He only outperformed Trump by a couple of points versus Biden in a general election, but it's still, you can't deny that it's polls that are better for DeSantis. And there's a lot more to this article if you want to jump into it as well. I just wanted to show you I wasn't just pulling it out of my ass. So yeah, I can see DeSantis has kind of an unclear path to victory. It's there. It's possible, but he's going to have to get past Trump. And I'm going to bring up a couple factors as to why, but another thing too is DeSantis hasn't actually officially declared. And I also kind of think that puts him on a back heel. There's a switch that flips when you declare presidency. You have to do a bunch of paperwork. There's ways you can solicit donations after that you previously were allowed to, you now can't, and etc. You can look into that if you wanted all the exact details, but it does flip a legal switch now, and I feel like once DeSantis flips that legal switch, people will start taking him seriously as a candidate. You'll see more people step out and endorse him, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, you're seeing people say like Trump's getting wins and DeSantis is getting losses, but DeSantis isn't even out there fighting for wins yet. So how can he be taking losses when he's not even participating? It's weird because everyone speculates DeSantis is going to get in. If again, I do too. So I'm in that camp. But yeah, I don't feel like DeSantis has started swinging punches yet. He keeps making subtle comments, and I think his super PAC made a comment on Twitter, but nothing really too direct. So, yes, talks about Ted Cruz. Everyone's going to rally around Ted Cruz, and that didn't work out. Okay. So the next factor I'm going to talk about is uniting the party a bit with polling data. This is some stuff about the GOP polling data, and if numbers like just reading raw data and percentages make your eyes glaze over, give me about 2 minutes or just skip over it. I'm going to start talking about views of the Republican Party and what they vote on. So first, let's look at Trump's main ideas in the GOP. He was a big immigration guy. He was a big economy guy. He had some national security and terrorism comments, but I don't think that was like the main staple of his presidency. I think if you really want to take away anything from his presidency, it was that he did some peace deals in the Middle East. He was more, I won't say he was, people really attribute Donald Trump for like a peaceful guy. He escalated the wars that we were in much more than they were already going. He was the bomb the shit out of them president, keep that in mind. So the wars that we were in, he kicked up a notch, and he was a bit more shackles off, let's say, where other people were a little bit more worried about casualties and maybe looking a little violent. That being said, he didn't start any new wars, so the people that like him for that, I can see why, but he wasn't an anti-war guy. So he's not your ally, he's just the lesser of two evils, in a sense. But yeah, so I'm kind of shocked looking at the citation that crime is so low, to be honest. So, but yeah, we're going to talk about crime, immigration, the economy, and a couple other things here. So we're going to talk about also the party changing. In 2020, the party was 63% in favor. They viewed immigration as an important issue by 63%. Now this went up about 10% over 6 years. The 2014 Gallup poll shows that it was 52% in 2014. So 9% in 6 years. And why would it do that? Well, the party went through a transformation when Donald Trump won. In 2016, about 28% of the United States population identified it as a member of the GOP, and that number dropped down to 25%. So they lost 3% of the United States population. About 3.3 million people is 1% of the population, so that's about 10 million people dropped out of the party. Then that number went back up to 28 and sits at 27 right now. And that's because a lot of people that were more loyal to Trump joined the party. They liked what Trump was doing. They weren't part of the GOP and came in. So the party is only 1% smaller, roughly 3 million people smaller than it was before Trump took office. It did go through some changes, though. That's kind of my theory on that. And, well, it's not theory. I have my theories on why that is. I think some of them can be backed up if anyone challenges me on it, but let's just assume for the sake of my argument that I'm right for right now and move forward. So this is kind of his advantage of being the incumbent, is the party is slightly transformed in a way that benefits him because he was, again, the last person selected by the party to represent the party in a presidential election. Now, terrorism and national security, I think I kind of addressed that a little bit. He was the bomb the shit out of him president. Some people really like his national foreign policy because he wants to get out of wars, wants to stop spending money there, but doesn't want to appear weak on the world stage. You know, like speak softly and carry a big stick. Not that bad it's a tested policy. You can agree with it or not. It's still viable. So number 3 is Trump's biggest first weakness, his handling of COVID. Now, we can pull up polls and show he did not have good numbers on handling COVID. I don't think I need to prove that. I think it was pretty borne out, and there's a lot of data on that. People did not think he was great on COVID, and he's actually weak on a lot of fronts here. He could be attacked from both sides on this. So, if you remember, Trump did not want to lock down. He wanted, people attacked him, Democrats especially, independents too, but Democrats especially attacked him, said that he wanted to prioritize the economy over prioritizing people's health. That he cared more about dollars. And people remember this. I can look it up if you want to challenge it. But that was the initial narrative before Trump locked down. So Trump eventually locked down the government, and about 3 months into it, I remember the human experiment or the experiment of human sacrifice when Georgia opened back up and Florida opened back up. They called them Death Santis, and these people bucked back against the federal shutdown measures that Trump was putting in, and Trump even criticized them for it, said it was too soon. So I think DeSantis really has some ground on him there. When I opened my state back up and bucked back against lockdowns, after a few months, you told me I was wrong, and you kept spending trillions of dollars, pumping more and more money into the economy, which contributed to the inflation that they're going to also blame on Biden. But I really feel like, you can make a reasonable argument that Trump did set the groundwork for that. He did start PPP, and he did the eviction moratorium and a lot of the stimulus checks. And this is even talking about when, after the 2020 election, Trump said he would have done a $2,000 stimulus check, and the Senate race in Georgia was coming up, which prompted the Joe Biden administration to match him on that. Not saying that Trump is at fault for this, but he was saying he would have even spent more money, and that Biden wasn't spending enough when he lost the election. And it prompted Biden to throw out another $1,400 check there to make people happy and get them to go out in Georgia and vote against Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker. So Trump was willing to spend more. Or he was lying to the American people to get their vote. Pick your poison. Neither of them are good. So if you want to try to defend Trump on inflation, just kind of keep that in mind. He either lied right to your face or was more than willing to keep just throwing money at the American people to get votes. Trump also left Fauci in place, which he often deferred to him, and also said, trust your state and local experts, telling people that were protesting Gretchen Whitmer because they said her lockdowns were draconian, trust Gretchen Whitmer and just do what she says. So I'm not saying it was bad. I kind of agree with the lockdowns, at least for the first few weeks, months. I'm in Georgia, so I love that they ended when they did. But I agreed with them when we didn't have any information. But if you're running in the Republican primary, these talking points really hurt Trump. He left Fauci in place. He didn't do anything about Fauci. He attacked Ron DeSantis and Brian Kemp for going against lockdowns. And this isn't even addressed the giant elephant in the room that maybe half of GOP voters don't like Trump as a person as well. Like Trump, it's a hard one to cover because it's speculation. I bet I'm speculating a lot here, but I don't think Trump personally is anti-abortion. I think he's just paying lip service and doing what people want. And I think people know that and look past it. I think it's kind of an open secret, but since he's doing the right things, putting the right judges in place for the anti-abortion people, they kind of just ignore it. But if they get somebody else, I think that the abortion's not going to make or break if people vote for Trump or DeSantis. I think either one of them is good enough for most people. I think Ron DeSantis is actually outperforming Trump on that. He's throwing red meat to the base right now by doing a 6-week abortion ban. And Trump's currently out there talking about how abortion's a losing strategy for the GOP and 15 weeks is good enough and blah, blah, blah. And it makes him look weaker on the issue, which is great for a general election, but I don't think it's good right now for the primary. I think his base wants him to be more on top of that. So, but yeah, Trump really has a leg up in abortion. I put those 3 judges in place. And again, anyone who hates Mitch McConnell, he is the reason Roe v. Wade's gone. Mitch McConnell basically just lobbed Trump a softball and let him knock it out of the park. And I'm pro legal abortion. I just been saying you need that guy. He's instrumental to the right. He's a damn political genius. So next topic is immigration. It's down here toward the bottom, but again, it's one I mentioned because Trump's presence in the GOP is growing immigration concerns within the party. It's one of his main, even if it still isn't top 5 for the party. It's just something Trump runs on, so that's kind of why I want to cover it. And I skip other things like gun policy, where the only real thing about gun policy in Trump was the red flag laws, and like the GOP doesn't care that much about race relations. So, also I should show. Well, I just pulled the page up just to show you it. You can check it out if you want. This is where I'm getting the numbers of why the party cares about things and doesn't. So, I'm not just reading the general graph here and taking numbers incorrectly. So, yeah, immigration. Anyways, so Trump needs better messaging on immigration. This is I think his biggest problem. He said several times while he was in office that he's pro legal immigration. We need more immigrants than ever. I think I looked it up and I found 9 different times he said that in speeches and rallies and such. But even people on his side of the aisle think that he is not pro-legal immigration. I'm going to get into that in a second, but it's partially due to his changes to cut migration down when he was changing chain migration to make it a more merit-based system. Now, I like that effort, but he did cut it down. Now, to be wary of some trying to use net immigration, I'm just going to get ahead of a bad argument here. People, you like to look at net immigration. That is a disingenuous statistic to bring up when we're looking at immigrants. I like to look at other factors like percentage of population that are immigrants, as well as the raw number of how many are here as well. I think percentage of population tells a better story. So in the 1980s, we had about 7% of our immigrants, of our nation's immigrants, around 14 million people, just in case you were curious. In 2016, it's now at about 43 million people, but again, our population has blown up since then. So it's only about 13% of the nation. Now, that's not a lot, but it is a double from before. And again, the more people here, they do end up creating more economic opportunity over time. Immigrants open businesses actually more often than United States citizens, I'm pretty sure. I'm pulling that out of my ass. If you fact check me on that, I won't deny it, but pretty sure they do. So immigration is a net benefit to GDP, and usually within 1 or 2 generations it is. So I'm pro-immigration, but I personally think it should be algorithmically based on what level wage workers we need and whatnot. It should be based on the economy's status at the time. But that's a completely different tangent. Sorry for rambling. So it's safe to say that prior to Trump reducing that number, it was climbing at a so prior to Trump reducing the number of legal immigrants coming in with his changes to chain migration, it was safe to say we were already bringing in an unprecedented amount of immigrants as a percentage of the United States population. Over 30 years, the percentage of immigrants we had here doubled. So we were bringing them in at a slightly higher rate. So Trump made the system more merit and less nepotism based. Now, I have this in my script here, but is nepotism the correct word for that? Can you say nepotism in a non-derogatory way and just more of a classification? I don't know. Completely off topic, but if somebody knows, please tell me in the comments. It's super interesting. So, since 40 to 50% of the GOP in 2018 were for giving the Dreamers a good path to citizenship, and the rest of the nation obviously being more on board than that, I think that this policy Trump proposed is a fantastic centerpiece for his immigration policy. I think that showing he wants to give, I think it's 1.8 million here. I want to say later, this bill went through a lot of changes. It started out also being how he was going to curb chain immigration, which he did a different way, and the bill got gutted a bit, and it was just basically fund my wall, 2.4 million Dreamers. That's it. Just a quick trade, and I think this should be the centerpiece. I think this was fantastic politics. I think this was the deal making Trump was always talking about. We're going to give all the people that are here, which 50% of my own party approves of, give them all a path to citizenship as long as they meet certain criteria. And then we're going to put up a wall and seal the problem so it doesn't happen again. And then people all from here on out have to come in the right way. So for the ones that are already here, congratulations, you made it. Just to make sure we're not endorsing more people coming over, we put stronger preventative methods in place. I think it's fantastic policy, and I really think it should be the centerpiece of Trump's immigration stance. It would pull a lot of non-Trump GOP voters over to his side. It would show him being more reasonable. It would also show him giving the concessions to the Democrats, but also getting what he wants and what his base wants. And I just think everyone's happy with this. I don't see why it never. I kind of see why it never passed, but that's a different topic as well. I think this should be it, but at the same time, in the 2018 primary campaign, Trump's strategy was fear-mongering the caravans and immigration bad and illegal immigrants belong to MS-13 and blah, blah, blah. So maybe his team knows something I don't about stirring up the base. Maybe the base isn't as big of in favor of giving illegal immigrant citizenship as the numbers sometimes say. I don't know. I don't have the internal polling they have. They probably have experts on it, and I'm just a guy looking at websites. So I would trust them over me. But, I'm just doing my best. I think DeSantis is in a really good position to tiptoe on immigration as well, tiptoe both sides a little bit. Again, I don't think this is going to be the issue that's going to make or break the primary. Is going to be immigration. I think both of them have acceptable views for their party on this. I think Ron DeSantis is just a little bit better, clever of a speaker, whereas Trump's onstage performance comes from him more being like a showman. He's great at controlling a crowd, getting laughs, charming, funny. People are going to cringe when I say he's charming. He really does have he's amusing to watch. He could be telling you things that aren't true, and you might laugh because he just presents it in a good way. I don't know. I think he's all right in terms of like his stage presentation. I just think DeSantis is more appealing to a broad audience, and this again goes back to the general election. I think DeSantis has a better shot at winning the general just because he hasn't turned so many people off yet. A lot of politics is about people not knowing your deepest, darkest secrets yet, or in general, like Obama. He was relatively unknown. There wasn't a lot of Oppo research on him, and the things that were didn't stick, like he wasn't a U.S. citizen at birth and such. So, I don't know. I think Ron DeSantis has that advantage, but it could all be ruined tomorrow. Someone could just dig in and find something real bad about him, and that whole kind of cloaked figure thing could be gone. So, yeah. So, as for the woke, the crime, anti-woke, and some other GOP culture politics, I really think that either guy you pick is good on this. I think Ron DeSantis' record is a little more dependent on getting things done, whereas Trump's is more just signaling. Ron DeSantis has the advantage here, I feel like, because he can say, look, I went to war with Disney. I actually passed policies against wokeness. I did this and that, and I went into schools and fixed them. I kicked that DA out of office that wasn't prosecuting criminals. I did the things that everyone else here is just talking about. So it's going to be important to see Ron DeSantis succeed in this fight with Disney. Otherwise, it could tarnish his record, and it won't put him below Trump, but it'll put him on par with Trump, and he'll lose an advantage on this particular issue. So I kind of want to cover a couple other things. They're a little off topic, but I feel like they fit into this. And I lost my play. Oh, the first thing I want to talk about is the salty neocon tangent, I call it. All right, so we see in the 2020 elections, right-wing voters will turn their nose up at Trump or Trump-endorsed candidates and either split the ticket or sometimes just not vote for anybody in that particular office at all. We saw a lot of votes for Kemp. I think Kemp beat Walker by 9 points. I think there were other examples, but I really think that's the clearest one. If anyone challenges me on that, I can go dig up the whole argument, but I'm kind of going from memory on this one. Now, I've referenced them twice already. I'm a big fan of the Commentary podcast, but I think that I'm going to bash them a little bit now. I think that they kind of embody this neocon elitist attitude a bit. If you participate in your party's primaries, and each faction under the GOP gets to offer up their guy they think should best represent the party, and you vote in the primaries and you take part in that, you're participating in a process with your other party members, even if you only agree with their guy 82% and your guy 95%, and you think their guy's a little bit of an a-hole, you're still participating in that process. So if your guy doesn't win, for you to just take your ball and go home and not vote for their guy after you participated in the voting process and expect them to vote for your guy if they lose, it just stinks of this, like, it's entitled. Maybe it's unfair. Really, is the biggest thing I have with it is you participated in this process. Your guy lost fair and square. Now suck it up and go out and vote for the other guy that again sides with you 82% instead of 95% because you participated. I use the same argument when I talk to people that say taxation is theft, and this is going to trigger some people probably if they hear it. I I think taxation and theft is the same thing. You are participating in a federal election to elect representatives that are going to put your policies in place. Well, 60% of people voted for those that are going to put a tax in place that gives them roads. You participated in the voting process and you lost. You had your chance to rally your support and get your voters, and you lost. So now you have to accept that you lost and accept the policy of the losing side. Now, this doesn't mean you can't make your voice heard. This doesn't mean you can't push back. It doesn't mean they get to just do whatever the hell they want. You can still push your perspective even as the minority party and make sure that they're not overspending or screwing people over, et cetera, et cetera. But it does mean you kind of have to let them get their way. I think Biden should have got a little bit more of Build Back Better than he did because he was elected. He won. So going back into bashing commentary, this is how I know that a person can't shed their bias, because these are some of the smartest, most insightful people that are in politics, been it their whole life. Some of them are legacy from their parents being in it their whole lives. These are super intelligent people, but I've heard them go to bat for felons that got convicted, like Scooter Libby, because he's a friend of somebody on the podcast, or the Iraq War because they worked for those administrations and they're a fan of the politicians. They will ignore that there were lies that got us into the Iraq War, and there were failures, and it was a bad thing overall. Most of the country thinks it's a bad thing, and I heard them just do like a puff piece on how it brought the life expectancy up by like 3 years. A war that we're in for 20 years that killed like tens of thousands of U.S. troops and contractors, and et cetera, et cetera. And they're praising it because we got 3 years of life expectancy. That's going to go away as we recede from the area. So, like they're not perfect, but they're great. You really should give them a shot. I actually send these videos to John Podhoretz, and he's answered a couple of emails, but I don't think he cares. I would beg for just a shred of mentorship, but he has no reason to help somebody that doesn't even, not even on the same side of the aisle as him. I'm left to center, so he has no reason to actually care. I wouldn't expect him to, but I just respect them even if they aren't perfect. So just go into it with tempered expectations of them also just being human beings. That's my neocon tangent. And for my last major point, I want to get into what I call the Trump Slayer argument. There's a guy getting into the race, and I feel personally, this is my theory, that he is only getting into the race to go after Trump, and his name is Chris Krispy Kreme. So Chris Christie kind of got the shaft from Trump. If you remember, he attacked Trump in the primaries, and he was back to being buddy-buddy with them, and then he attacked everybody that was attacking Trump, like Marco Rubio. He really ripped Marco Rubio apart in the primary. And then he dropped out of the race and endorsed Donald Trump and became part of his transition team. And then he was fired from the transition team. He was passed over for all cabinet positions and for anything he was qualified for, and just kind of let go. And then Trump continued to attack him, make jokes about his weight, say he was sold out to lobbyists, and that's why he fired him, is because he was bringing lobbyists in. But lobbyists never left when Chris Christie left. I mean, I'm sure some did. I bet you could find a bunch left, but lobbyists were still a huge part of the Trump administration. So it's not like he got rid of them all. He just got rid of some. So for me, it's pretty clear Trump wasn't a huge Christie fan and kind of screwed him over. And I think Christie is literally just getting into the election to go after Trump. I think maybe he's got some Never Trump money behind him that they're not worried about wasting as long as they can keep Trump out of the White House because they don't like him as a person. I think that Trump is enchanted, or Chris Christie is taking an iron sword and using his Never Trump magic to enchant it with Trump Bane to go slay the Golden Dragon. So it could be something that really throws a huge wrench into everything, and I'm super excited about it. I love watching stuff like it's so fun. So last I had to sign up for an account for this last one here. And it's just more. This one really goes into how Trump really just gave the shaft to Chris Christie a bit. And again, I'm just kind of showing it to back up what I'm saying. They'll tell you more than I did here in this brief coverage. I just kind of wanted to give you the backdrop of Trump Christie. And Christie's wrote a book where he wasn't friendly to Trump, and he's been on the news bashing him in the last couple of years. Like, it's no secret if you watch politics and pay attention to the main news channels. You'll see it. I don't think CNN is as bad as people say. I'm just putting that out there, completely unrelated. Anyways, so just for a final conclusion, is Trump good for 2024 primary versus the other candidates? And it appears, yes. Flatly, yes, he is the best candidate. He is the most likely to win. He is the one with the most name recognition. The party is tailored a bit to him. He looks to be, right now, based on the data we have, the strongest candidate in the most states, just to win the primary. I'm not talking about the general at all. I think in a perfect world, and getting past the it's his turn argument, I like DeSantis more than Trump, but I really think, what's his name, Rick Scott? I really just like the dude. He seems genuine. I really like him as just from what I see, an individual. I don't think he has any chance to win. In a perfect world, I think he's my pick. If I was going to vote GOP, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And what if Gavin Newsom it comes out and he sounds rational? Oh, that guy that he ran for the mayor or governor of Ohio, or maybe it was Senate, and he seemed really reasonable. He's basically a Republican and with a D in front of his name. He seemed like really reasonable. Shapiro from Pennsylvania, he's got some stances I don't mind at all. He said some things I like. There's a lot of Democrats out there that if they ran, it'd be interesting. I don't think they'd win the primary, though. They're too to the center. They're not far enough to the left to stir the base up, but I think DeSantis also is the best one to unite the party under the banners under the GOP party. NatCon, NeoCon being the two major ones that are bashing each other right now. I think DeSantis is the best. I think DeSantis is generally the second pick for most Trump supporters as well. I do see a lot of rising sentiment that DeSantis is a neocon planned, rhino, pretending to be MAGA, but those are mostly just on Twitter. I don't see him almost anywhere else. Trump keeps attacking DeSantis, and I see a lot of people that like Trump pushing back against it, saying, please don't do that. We want the party united. So, there's also speculation and a bet between Nuance Bro and Destiny that if Trump doesn't win the primary, he's going to go third party. Just going to go in here and say, I don't think that's going to happen. I think if Trump loses the primary, unless he gets completely screwed over and it's clear as day, I think he's just going to accept it. But honestly, based on this data right now, the chances of him losing are pretty low. So generally, I think Trump is the best candidate for 2024 primary. Despite some obvious downsides and potential problems in the general, he has some big holes in his armor, especially when it comes to COVID handling from both the left and the right. Too slow to react, lockdown measures, Fauci, I went over that. Kemp and DeSantis could attack him pretty effectively on COVID if you want to make Trump. Oh, I want to make a Trump's pros and cons list. Talking about all of them I can think of, not just the ones I mentioned in terms of electoral politics. I think that would be fun. I think trying to be honest about it. I also kind of want to go through all 10,000 or whatever of the Trump lies a few years later and find out which ones ended up being true, because people say Trump was right about everything and people say Trump lied more than any other president. I kind of want to go through there and just separate the fact from the fiction. That'll be fun. All right. Yeah. Sorry. When I get rambling, I can't shut up. This is page 9 of the notes. So if you liked it, give me a like. If you subscribe, I'll see you next time. And if you made it this far, man, hey, thanks. 49 minutes. Awesome. Good job. Pat yourself on the back and have a good day.